All right, all right. I think we're spinning live. We're so happy to see you today. I'm so happy to see you today. How's it going today? All right, all right. Um, Today is the day where I discuss with you some of the things that we talked about and learned in supervision. Sometimes I'm learning in supervision from my supervisees, and each group is different. And we had a dynamic group today, and we talked about a ton of things. I want to share with you a little bit about that. And one of the things that we have been covering or that we covered this week was trying to understand and excuse me, identify um how we get out of certain insecurity patterns, how we end up in certain insecurity patterns, and what we do about it. Okay, and so we're going to talk about that in just a second. It was so much that we went over, but we spent a lot of this session also going over medications. Okay, so we went over a lot of medications because this will be on the exam. I think it's important that we know about the medications as social workers is a reason why they're on our social work exam. And I can't tell you the amount of times that I have had situations where I had to make a recommendation for a client to go and talk with their psychiatrist or physician about med changes, about, hey, it's possible that there's some things are going on here. Looks like you're having these symptoms. You may need to ask if there's some other medical or medication interventions that can help this. And then many times they'll come back and then they're much easier to treat because things have been identified and remedied. Okay. And so we talked a lot about that. We'll go through some of the questions that we went over. And I want to show you one of the questions too. I want to see if you know this question. And this actually was not, excuse me, this actually was not a let's see. This was not, here we go. All right. This one was not a medication question. We got this one from Dawn Apgar. We had one of her questions to pop up. And so this is a really good one. Erickson, According to Erickson, psychosocial development allows which sequence of relationship formation? A, attachment, autonomy, intimacy. B, intimacy, attachment, autonomy. C, autonomy, attachment, intimacy. D, intimacy, autonomy, attachment. All right. So which one do you think it is? Real quick, because I got a lot of stuff to cover, but a lot of times I suggest that we look at safety concerns. There's no safety here that I can identify. Sometimes we need to know a little bit about what's going on. We need to know a little bit about Erickson. But what if we didn't? Sometimes we can answer questions without having all the information or not knowing a whole lot about it. And this is some of what we study and discuss in our supervision sometimes with some of these test questions. But if you look at it, it says according to Erickson, his psychosocial development uh follows which sequence of relationship formation. So it looks like if we're talking about psychosocial development as a whole, we're not just speaking about when someone's an adult onto to where their life ends. We're talking about maybe a lifespan development. So if we look at that in context, to me, it would be something that we would want to investigate when we're talking about intimacy being the first thing that we develop. And if we know just a little bit about Erickson, we know that he spoke about intimacy from the standpoint of in his stages. And I love this little chart here that I have with Erickson, and it just breaks down. I'm not gonna go real deep into it, but it breaks down what happens in each stage. and what's supposed to be achieved in each stage: hope, will, purpose. I like this one: intimacy versus isolation. That's what we're talking about, the love phase. If we don't develop within 18 to 40, this is generally when we get married, or we're a lot of times not going to be married in some situations if we don't meet it in this window sometimes, or we have difficulty. And some people will end up being isolated. That's what he believed. But when we learn how to find happiness and all these other things, I don't want to get too deep into that. But so yeah, this was a term used by Erickson. Let's scroll back. So intimacy was the term. However, that is not what we're looking at, because that's down the road, and this looks like it's so intimacy, attachment, autonomy, that's almost backwards. um it's skewed, so we'll get rid of both of the intimacies because that's not where we're going to start. And where we want to start is with attachment. If we think about Erickson, it's what? Trust versus mistrust. That's the first stage. That's during the first year of life, right? What's the next one after trust versus mistrust? You got autonomy versus shame. Yeah, autonomy versus shame and doubt. Okay. And that happens here around age 2. Okay. And then we're kind of talking about intimacy and intimacy building, things that occur in general, I guess is what is being suggested here. So that would be the answer. Boom. Okay. So we took a long time on that. Oh man. We can't do that on each one. Which medication is considered to be the gold standard? I didn't even do the multiple choice because my folks, we want them to know this off the top of their head. And so the answer to this one is lithium, but we did go over some of the other medications and what they're used for. What is Xanax used for? A lot of times anxiety, Ritalin, sometimes with ADHD. And we talked about the difference with Ritalin with ADHD, especially with children versus if someone who has narcolepsy, okay, and clozapam or clozaril. We didn't get a whole lot into this one because we didn't actually bring this up, but we talked about it in some of these other ones. If a patient with bipolar disorder experiences manic symptoms that are not controlled by lithium, which medication would likely be added? We talked about what Haldol is. That's the antipsychotic, right? Ritalin, we talked about that. We know this is an antidepressant, or SSRI. All right, Ritalin. And so Depakote, which we also talked about many times, may be used for seizures, seizure medication. Some of these medications that they use for seizures and things like that have multiple uses that support with mood and mood control and regulation of mood and sometimes behavioral things. Which medication is primarily used to treat ADHD? We already talked about Ritalin. What's Prolixin though? Antipsychotic. We talked about all those things, right? Then we shifted and we got to hurry with this. Like, what? This is Mary J. Blige. Some of you are familiar with her. She's an R&B artist, and I don't know that she stated this. I saw this somewhere. And this is it says that she believed that Mary J. Blige believes that all men cheat. Some of you all might believe that, right? Unfortunately, but Mary J. Blige believes that all men cheat. I've never met a man who only has one woman. And we discussed in some of the groups. We didn't get to cover this one in all the groups because I just sometimes adding stuff as I go. It's like, oh, this just happened. Let me add this. All right. And so we discussed like how do we get there? How would you treat this client if they were looking for perspective and that was their belief system? And it's important that we talked about meeting the client where they are, because maybe perhaps, like, what is this statement telling us about, possibly about Mary, that we would want to rule out if we were in psychotherapy with Mary? Okay. So it says that Mary J. Blige believes all men cheat. I've never met a man who only has one woman. So what is that telling you about her experience? What is that telling you about what happened to her? I don't know a lot about her situation, but I would suspect that possibly when we're doing the deductions, that she's never been in a relationship that she wasn't cheating on, which also tells you something about what attracts her and what she's attracted to, which also tells you something about what she may possibly think and believe about herself. a lot of times this is unconsciously. I can't tell you the amount of clients that aren't consciously aware of their insecurities because they're doing big things. They're very smart, they're very intelligent, but not aware of their own insecurities that exist. And it plays out when we start to choose relationships. It plays out when we start to choose relationships. Um, I had wrote something down. If you don't think that much of yourself, which sometimes it's kind of like that, you will attract someone who believes the same. Okay. Not to say Mary J doesn't think that much about herself. I think that she feels that she's a beautiful woman and she prides herself and that she knows that she's something. But there's something inside that we have to process in therapy that is saying it spells out that your actions are saying something else. Your actions are saying that you have to settle before you get what you deserve. Your actions are saying that I'm going to be, in a sense, okay with situation. And I'm not saying that's what she's saying, but when I program, when I program in my mind that this is the case, and I want to get back into another thing that it tells us about Mary J that may or may not be true. Some of the things we want to rule out in therapy. So, so it's possible that this has happened in a relationship. This is the same cycle too that we often see with someone who's been in abusive relationships. We often see that people who have been in physically abusive relationships, emotionally abusive relationships, fall into that. And many times their worldview is that this is kind of maybe how all relationships are. This is all that I saw. This is all that I experienced. Question would be, what was her experience? She said, all men cheat. I've never met a man. So that means your uncles, your cousins, and perhaps your father, unless he died early, unless he was deceased early. Was that also a situation too where you observed this firsthand and became conditioned to accept and expect certain things from men? These are some things that we would have to rule out in the situation with Mary and try to get down to the depths of where she developed the core belief, possibly that this exists and that maybe she should settle or not. I'm not saying that she settled, but we want to find out what her core beliefs are. But it's interesting when you start processing the belief system. So we looked at this particular situation, and then we looked at another situation that I want to show you really quickly. Okay. And I'm going to stop the share here. And I'm going to show you a quick video um, of another situation that seemed interesting, and you'll see a little bit of intervention with this particular case. But let me see. Let me go on and share this again. Um, y'all give me a second. I always have trouble with it. Never wants to just. Well, it's me. Okay. Um, yes. Oh, let me share this as well before we get into that. All right. So we have a training coming up that we would love for you all to attend. This one is, if you're part of Social Workers Alabama, you got a sweet deal. If not, you still have a sweet deal. And we're going to be discussing the ties that bind, caregiver quality of care and quality of life. And we're excited to have this presented by none other than Dr. Nancy Kelly, PhD. And so we want you to come and check us out. We had a really great training on last month, or actually earlier this month. And so we want you to step in real quickly. Please check us out if you're looking to become a supervisor. This is going to be an awesome training as well. We break down what it is that you need to know so there's no questions asked. We even have a bonus video that shows you how to build up your private practice through supervision. Okay. So that's something you want to check out on November 11th and 12th. That one's coming up soon. And then we have the DSM-5 TR training, which is a requirement for all LICSWs. It's required that you take this training somewhere, but we have this one on demand. And we've gotten great responses as far as the content that's in this course. So we invite you to do that. But let's get back to what we're talking about here. So here's our situation. What time is it? It's two. Okay, we gotta hurry up. So so we have another situation and I like to use somewhat of a threefold approach here to what I gathered was very similar situations. So the supervisees could see the same type of scenario from different people. Okay. So a lot of times we're almost going to treat this client almost the same because they have the same core problem, but it's going to be very different because it's going to be custom to that client. But a lot of times we're looking at certain things, and we don't have time to go into that, but we do look at things that way. So let's take a listen at this situation here that's very similar. Uh-oh. See, I was supposed to be ready. Okay, so she said she let me just bring it back. Hope I don't lose it. Okay, pause. All right, here we go. Dang. She said, man, that's serious. Your pattern will break. Your pattern will break when you learn to be what you are trying to get from this person. And this is so common. We talked about how this develops in childhood. And for those of you all who are seeing children, how we can be on the spot to treat this as it emerges instead of like with me treating mostly adults catching it on the back end. Okay. And so we talked about that. It's so much that we talked about, so much to cover. But I want to bring back up my because we got to roll. I'm about to go way over. Let's see here. So we we get a lot in supervision, and it's crazy. With each group, we're talking about different things because the supervisees are bringing up different subjects and topics and questions and concerns, and so it just gets really interesting. I really love doing supervision. I have just grown to love it in the biggest way, and let's see. Here we go. All right. So that was Mary J. Now, so this was the scenario I brought up. And again, we're looking at it in three different dimensions. Basically, we're doing similar work with everybody. Okay. Everything I said about Mary J is everything that we're going to talk about with this particular client that just spoke. And then also with this client too. A client reports that they have been looking for love in the wrong place. It's kind of like what she said. Feel overly needy, struggle to maintain friendships, and repeatedly ends up in abusive relationships. What psychological concepts might explain why the client is drawn to these types of relationships, and what interventions would you use to help them to break this cycle? And so I didn't necessarily go in this order when I did uh, supervision, but we're just bringing it up like this. So one thing you might want to do is ask your supervisees, what would they do? How would they approach this situation? What questions would you be wanting to ask? Um, and so we can identify right off that there are some attachment concerns and some unresolved childhood trauma, I would say, in each of these situations. We don't know this, but you've got to make the emotional mathematical deductions. So what type of attachment might be experienced here? Well, basically, if you've experienced neglect, then the idea, and you can read what's being said here, is that you're going to seek relationships that are very similar to what you have experienced. And then so when we get into intervention mode, we talked a little bit about repetition, compulsion, and this refers to, it's a Freudian term that kind of explains how we just unconsciously repeat the same patterns. Like I talked about, if somebody's been physically abused, then that's what they seek unconsciously. If they've been in with cheaters, then unconsciously, why is it it's so many great people, but you're attracted to the cheaters, right? Or they're attracted to you, because some people don't like to feel that way, so they're attracted to you, whatever. But y'all may end up locked up, right? So we work with that in a sensitive way. And then we talked a little bit about the cure, about the cure, or what type of interventions that we want to use. And one of the multiple choice questions that I wasn't able to cut and paste because of computer problems is like, who developed IFS? And that's internal family systems. So we talked a little bit about internal family systems, Robert Schwartz, and some of the etiology behind that. And then that led us to talk a little bit about the use of visualizations in the therapeutic process. And I'm going to show real briefly a quick example of what that looks like. And what I've been trying to do with my supervisees is get them exposed to uses of different modalities. IFS is considered maybe a newer modality, but in here we're primarily just talking about the inner child and visualization. So we're looking at some actual um, intervention here. Let me see if I can find this video, and we're going to share that, and then we're going to phase on out. We're going to phase on out. But this is what we did in supervision. And this is a lot of times, like you said, like I've said in the past, so that it's not so dull. It's really important, I think, to bring in video. This thing is not going to let me do what I want to do. Video to support what it is that you're trying to break down in supervision. It lightens it up, especially if you don't want to be talking the whole time. Sometimes it's kind of like a reaction piece. Um, Here we go. So this is those of you who are not familiar with how to connect with the inner child through use of visualizations. Here we go. I'm just going to show a little bit. All right. So this is an active way to connect with your child in any earlier stressful experiences and even through. And real quick, I want to give credit to Brittany Knoll. That was Brittany Knoll, who was the coach that was supporting in that last video. And then here we have Med Circle. Okay, connect with the inner child. We want to give attribution here. Thank you. So to connect with your inner child through visualization, first you have to create what we call a power place or a safe place. So you have to visualize something that is beautiful, serene. For everybody, it's different. Okay, it could be a full garden, it could be the ocean, it could be the mountains, it could be a specific home or setting, but any place that you feel safe, empowered, and safe. So right now, I would like to just imagine what that place is for you. For people who might have some difficulty with visualizations, you can try to look up on the internet some pictures, like oceans are calming, so maybe look up pictures of oceans and just stare at it. Really try to get that visualization down. If you can't do it in your mind's eye, then do it through looking at a picture or a photograph that might bring you. So I'll just give you guys a minute to find your safe. All right, I guess we don't need to let him meditate. And in this place, you feel strong, safe, and supported. So just spend a little bit of time just enjoying it, soak it in. Maybe think about it through your five senses. Your inner child, your younger self has entered. Okay, so they've come into this place too. Hug your younger self, make them feel at home. Okay, so that's enough of that. What we're doing here is a lot of times I find that with clients, just talking to them, like we were just talking in supervision about, and this was actually a younger client, but was just so hard on themselves and just felt that, anytime that they did something wrong, that they deserved to have repercussions, and so that shows me that there's likely a self-worth concern, right? And sometimes when you're talking to the client directly, no, I deserve what I get and this and that, because they're so hard on themselves, sometimes it's difficult to reach them where they are. So when you do some of this inner child type of work, we're going to the child in them. We're going to the person, especially it works with anybody, but if you have an adult, they're going back into their childhood. This is what happened at this particular time. You weren't able to defend yourself. You were helpless. You were confused. You didn't even know that you were doing anything wrong. People were controlling you and your environment, this and that. And so what would you want to say to that child in this situation? How would you want to have compassion for her or him in this situation? So it allows for them to get somewhat outside of themselves and connect with another piece of themselves. And many times this merges them into something more positive overall, because that child is actually them. So now I can start having compassion for that child, which inevitably causes me to have compassion for myself. And this is how we do treatment. I better stop now. I've gone way over. Sorry. I hope this is good for y'all. We're going to pick back up on next week, and I hope y'all have a blessed weekend. Until then,